Hello, I am Richard Kyle Mosley, and here's my Nighthawks card ID. Hopefully you can see that well. So it's Richard Kyle Mosley right there with my 900 number, 900 915 678. And here's also my driver's license. I don't know if you need that, but there it is. My picture there. Again, I'm Richard Kyle Mosley, and this is my presentation, Discretion in the Courtroom, a Controversial Necessity, where I'm going to be discussing discretion and why it's a needed aspect in U.S. courts. There are arguments against the use of discretion in courts. These arguments include the use of discretion establishes a system that does not dispense equal sentencing for criminals who commit the same crime, and the use of discretion allows for the introduction of bias, both implicit and explicit, into the courtroom. I detail out these arguments on the next following slides. Argument 1 that you saw on the previous slide suggests that discretion creates unequal sentencing because of the different perspectives of the judges for each case who exercise their discretion to achieve an appropriate sentence. It also suggests that two people who commit the same crime should receive the same sentence, and if they do not, then the right of equal justice under the Sixth Amendment is violated. This concern over equal justice is seen through the implementation of sentencing guidelines to help ensure that defendants who commit similar crimes receive similar sentences. And this is my rebuttal of argument 1, which states that equal justice cannot be achieved through the use of guidelines or other structured frameworks. For example, if guidelines are used to determine a sentence, then only details that apply to the guidelines are considered, and any other details of the case are discarded. This can create a situation where two cases are grouped together as being the same, but are actually different when considering the details that were discarded. In this situation, equal justice is not served because the reality is that one defendant is more guilty than the other. This is the reason discretion is needed. Discretion must be used to judge the severity of the crime and take into account all the details of the case so that the case is labeled accordingly and given the appropriate sentence. Also, yes, decisions can vary between different judges, but if sentences cannot be delivered accurately, or if cases cannot be grouped into the appropriate category of severity, then equal justice among similar cases cannot be achieved because the similarity of these cases cannot be appropriately determined. Therefore, the use of discretion gives the best opportunity for there to be equal justice. And argument 2 against discretion states that discretion allows judges to make decisions based on their perspective of the case and all its details, which creates a chance that judges will let their biases influence their decision. This bias can come in the form of explicit bias, where the judge is aware of his or her bias and lets it interfere with his or her decision, and can come in the form of implicit bias, where the judge is unaware of the bias affecting his or her decision. One study found that judges carry implicit biases concerning race, and that these implicit biases can affect judges' judgment, which would definitely be a concern because race should not be considered when determining a sentence. And here is my rebuttal of that argument. There is a chance that bias affects the case at hand, but justice could not be administered without discretion. Justice is a human ideal that cannot be conceptualized into an algorithm. Therefore, the attainment of justice requires human intellect. The many details of a case must be processed by human intellect if a correct sentence is to be obtained. The integration of bias is an unavoidable byproduct of the U.S. justice system. The U.S. justice system is not perfect, which no justice system is, but dispenses the most accurate sentences possible via the judge's discretion. And now we'll get into why discretion is needed. A few of these points were touched on earlier in my rebuttals. Discretion allows for sentences to be dispensed accurately, which goes back to my rebuttal of argument 1, where I was discussing how you cannot provide equal justice if the accuracy of the sentence cannot be determined correctly, and if the severity of the cases cannot be determined accurately, then equal justice can't be attained. And the second reason for why discretion is needed is discretion is needed to keep the U.S. courts functioning to the extent that allows them to process the great number of cases that are filed each year. So, for accurate sentencing, if sentences are dispensed based on guidelines or any kind of structured formula, the sentences will usually be too lenient or too harsh. This is due to the fact that there are many intricate details contained in each case which should be considered when deciding on a sentence. If these details are put aside because of the use of guidelines, then the sentence is more likely to not fit the particular defendant on trial. The fact is that there is no one-size-fits-all approach, which is why discretion from a judge must be used. And yes, it's obvious that every case that comes to the courtroom is different from the last. They're all unique, and we must use a system that is able to address the uniqueness of each case, and the best system to do that is one that uses the discretion of a human, which would be the judge. There's not any kind of structured formula, as I stated, that could do this. And for the functioning of the U.S. justice system, some solutions for limiting discretion in the courtroom include the use of a check system. This is a system that each case must go through while the case is being handled or after it has been concluded. Each case would be checked by third parties to see if any bias or unnecessary discretion was used, and then the case could then be retired or deemed as handled appropriately. This might eliminate discretion and bias in the courtroom, but it will also hinder the speed at which the court clears cases. The justice system must not only be able to provide the best objective decision on each case, but must also be usable in today's world. When looking at the caseload statistics for the superior courts in Georgia, it is clear that the implementation of reviewing every case would make the U.S. justice system unusable. And this just state, and many people, the suggestion of having a check system has been brought up, and like to determine if, like, how much discretion was used and if that discretion was appropriate, whether it be used by the prosecutor or the judge. Many feel that a check system like this could provide more equal justice across similar cases, but as I stated, it would not allow the system to function as it would need to. The system would grind to a halt, and this is clear when we look at the statistics on the next slide. Here are statistics for superior courts in Georgia. There's one superior court per county, so each county you see here on the left represents one superior court, and the columns show the different kinds of cases that are assigned to each court, with the total number of cases for each superior court seen on the far right. This is provided by Georgia AOC, or Georgia Administrative Offices of the Courts. And as we can see here, there are some courts that have a fairly low number. For example, Baker County has a very low number of cases that are filed each year. And this is for 2020. The total number of cases filed for 2020 and the statistics for that year. But there are also many courts or counties that have many cases filed. For example, we have Cobb County right here with 13,827. Down here we have Fulton with 18,816. We've got DeKalb with 10,077. So there are obviously many courts that have a great number of cases come through each year. And with the implementation of some kind of review system or check system, it would be impossible to clear the number of cases that they need to each year to provide. It'd be impossible for them to provide timely service to the American society. Decisions would take too long, and the system just would simply not function as it was made to. And here, down here, I also included totals for each column. This is the bottom section of this large chart over here, and it's just showing the totals for the different kinds of cases, including the criminal cases right here, and the civil here, and the total for every court in Georgia, 272,873. So obviously there are many cases coming through the courts in Georgia. In conclusion, the use of discretion is necessary for both the functioning and accuracy of the U.S. justice system. The idea that discretion creates unequal sentencing is not necessarily true, and the introduction of bias is simply a flaw which all justice systems have because of the ambiguity of justice. And these flaws must be accepted with the understanding that the use of discretion is the best way to handle cases. And here are all of my references that I used in this presentation, including the one right here that was used for the statistics chart of Georgia Superior Courts for the year of 2020. And that's it. That was my presentation on why discretion is needed in U.S. courts. Again, I'm Richard Kyle Mosley, and thank you for listening.